is being recorded.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for being here, essentially starting your fellowship journey. Welcome to this agriculture information session. Now, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Leigh Radford. I'm a long-term employee of the ABC, started the best part of 4 decades ago, and was the head of ABC Rural for some 12 years, in charge of programs like Landline and the Country Hour on radio, back roads, and a whole range of other things. And if you haven't heard my Twitter handle or my email address, it's Captain Rural. A lot of people know me as Captain Rural after spending a lifetime working for ABC Rural. Now, I'm pleased to host this information session today on behalf of the Winston Churchill Trust. But first, in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present, and we extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Now, the Churchill Fellowship itself, of course, it's an opportunity to travel overseas for 4 to 8 weeks to explore a topic or issue that you're passionate about. What a chance, what an opportunity. The Winston Churchill Memorial Trust was formed in 1965 with the principal objective of perpetuating and honouring Sir Winston Churchill's memory by awarding of Churchill Fellowships. One of the wonderful things about all of this is that you don't need to have an academic qualification to apply. In fact, you don't even need to have finished school. You can do a Churchill Fellowship on any topic, provided there's benefit to Australia or your community by you bringing back your knowledge and skills and sharing it with the people. Now, to apply, importantly, applicants are required to complete and submit an application form by the 1st of March, between the 1st of March and the 1st of May, I should say. Applicants may then be shortlisted for an interview after that application period closes. Those who have been awarded and completed a Churchill Fellowship are then called Fellows. Now, just a little housekeeping. Tonight's session is going to be focusing specifically on agriculture and horticulture topics. However, fellowships, the topics are incredibly diverse and broad, so it's just fine if your topic doesn't quite fit under this umbrella or are anything like the speaker's topics tonight. Now, you'll be able to submit questions via the Q&A function, the chat on this Zoom session, and our speakers here may be able to take those questions as we progress tonight. There'll certainly be a session at the end where we can really get stuck into questions. Now, if you miss your chance or think of more questions after the session's finished, you can contact the Churchill Trust directly via the Churchill Trust website, churchillfellowships.com.au. Also, be sure to check out the FAQ on the website, as your question may already be answered there. Now, we're aiming to wrap up this session in just over an hour, so let's get right underway. First, I'd like to introduce the Chief Executive Officer of the Winston Churchill Trust here in Australia. That's Adam Davey. Good afternoon, Adam.
Oh, good afternoon, Leigh, and thanks for that introduction and your overview of Churchill Fellowships. As Leigh said, my name's Adam Davey, the CEO of the Winston Churchill Trust. We're based here in Canberra, which is Ngunnawal and Ngambri country, and I'd like to acknowledge Australia's First Nations people, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to welcome any Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander people watching this session. We have a growing Indigenous Churchill Fellows network, which is sort of going from strength to strength, and I think that's a very good thing for us and a good thing for the country. I'm going to give you an overview of Churchill Fellowships, and I'm just going to bring up some slides to do that. And I think it's important to understand a little bit about the history, and Leigh has given us some of that. When Winston Churchill resigned as British Prime Minister in 1955, he was 80 years of age and had served under 5 reigning monarchs. He'd survived 3 wars. He'd been a writer, an historian, a journalist, an adventurer, a painter. He'd won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1953. And there was a widespread desire to honour Sir Winston and to capture the essence of his public service, but also his inspiration, his intellect, his humour for generations to come. And of course, Sir Winston wasn't perfect. No one can claim that of themselves. And you can read some insightful essays that are on our website that explore Winston Churchill through a contemporary lens. But he was someone who readily believed that anything was possible if you put your mind to it, and that the greatest figures in history were those who made a contribution to public service and their fellow countrymen. And this explains, I think, to some extent, the nature of Churchill Fellowships. When Prime Minister Menzies announced the news of Sir Winston's death to Australians in January 1965, he simultaneously announced the public fundraising appeal that would create the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust and therefore the seed funding for Churchill Fellowships. So on what's fondly referred to as Churchill Memorial Sunday, 28th of February 1965, a door-to-door appeal was launched, and over 220,000 Australians, with strong support from our Return Services League at the time, did a door knock and raised around $4 million. It was about £2.2 million back then. It was one of Australia's largest one-day public fundraising efforts in history. And we do like to brag that it was the only time in history that banks opened on a Sunday. Such was the extent of the funds and the support, and they opened on a Sunday so that those funds could be deposited. So quite an interesting history, and I still do run into people today who were at the door knock as a child generally, and they have fond memories of that time. So on to the attributes of a Churchill Fellow. Churchill Fellows are the types of people who are passionate and committed to an issue. They want to learn and share knowledge so that others in their community might benefit. Many applicants are motivated by a desire to bring about change and improve outcomes for people or the planet. Churchill Fellowships are more than just a study abroad program. It's an opportunity to become an expert in your field and make a real impact in the world. So it's a unique and prestigious opportunity open to Australians from all walks of life. As Leigh said, it's not an academic scholarship. It's also not a funding grant in that strict sense of funding grants. It's not just an overseas trip. It really is the start of a life-changing, lifelong journey and of your contribution to make Australia better. So a Churchill Fellowship doesn't need to comprise formal research. You can use a Churchill Fellowship to go and learn new skills, to train in something. You can use it to build networks and observe best practice in your chosen field. The fellowship is for overseas travel only and must be between 4 and 8 weeks and taken in one continuous journey. We do have a few changes which I'll speak to shortly. We've awarded about 4,500 Churchill Fellowships since 1965, and we typically award around 100 every year. Churchill Fellows do travel across the globe on the widest range and depth of topics, and they bring back to the country information, networks, projects, products, ideas, and innovation. All those things help make the country stronger. But it's also something that can make transformation in an individual. So if you do a Churchill Fellowship, you'll get something out of this as well. It's going to take you and your career or your passion, your projects to the next level. So to be eligible, it's not too many requirements. You have to be an Australian citizen or a permanent resident and over the age of 18 by the application closing date. We don't have an upper limit on the age, and we do get applicants through a very broad range of ages applying. You just need to be able to demonstrate that you're going to be able to come back and do something with this research. The ability to travel overseas is essential, and we can and do provide support if you have, for example, a disability, and that makes it a bit more difficult to travel overseas. And we actually, I think this is fairly obvious these days, offer virtual research options for people who can't travel physically due to disability or perhaps caring responsibilities. So while it's not the same as travelling overseas and meeting people face to face, you can conduct some or all of your Churchill Fellowship using video interview technology like this. And for people living in remote parts of Australia, we now offer the option of undertaking domestic travel. So that's in recognition of the fact that we have a lot of people who live in communities that haven't travel within Australia. And there's a whole range of challenges and a lot that could be learned by traveling within Australia. And historically, if you live in external territories such as Norfolk Island, we have seen fellows travel within Australia. So we've broadened that out a bit as a way to try and provide the opportunity to more people across Australia. Keeping that in mind, a Churchill Fellowship is an individual project, not a team project. I think that's important to understand, that there can only be one Churchill Fellow. So some people work in teams and they come to us saying, we want to apply for this. Our approach is this. Well, I think you need to choose who's going to be applying and who's doing it, because we won't be sending your whole team along. So that's important to recognise. But by all means, collaborate with other people. That's a critical part of being a Churchill Fellow. We do support, however, joint applications between Indigenous and non-Indigenous applicants on issues that are primarily First Nations business. And that's in the spirit of reconciliation. I think it's in the spirit of the benefits of having different viewpoints and perspectives on those issues. And so I think if that's an area that you're interested in, contact us at the Trust and talk to us about your approach. If you're undertaking tertiary studies, that's okay. However, your proposed project for your fellowship can't directly form part of that study. So you can't use the Churchill Fellowship to complete your PhD, for example. You're expected to commit 100% of your fellowship time and efforts to doing a Churchill Fellowship. And you do need to write a report, and there's an expectation when you come back that you share that knowledge and look at ways you can implement your findings. So it is a big task, and I think if you're undertaking tertiary study at the same time, you might not have the capacity. So think carefully about that before you apply. But a Churchill Fellowship, as I said at the start of this slide, is an opportunity for people from all walks of life. And that's a phrase, I guess, a turn of phrase that gets thrown around a lot, but for us, we actually do mean it. In terms of project eligibility, your project must be suitable for a fellowship and it needs to benefit the Australian community in some way. So you need to bring back and share knowledge, ideas, practices and skills. And you must demonstrate and put forward the case that you've fully explored the topic within Australia to be considered for a fellowship. We don't want to send you overseas when you could have just gone across the road to learn about the thing you want to learn about. The project has to be a self-contained project. So, if you're working for another organisation, you can't sort of say, look, I'll spend half my time doing this work for my employer while I'm on my fellowship. There's no reason why you can't extend your fellowship at your employer's cost or at your own cost. That's fine. But again, we want to invest in you to focus on your Churchill Fellowship. And I think it's true to say Churchill Fellowship does not need to relate to your employment. So you might work, on the farm as your kind of day job, and you might be a ceramicist in your spare time, and your fellowship is about your passion in that art form or something, and that's okay. You can apply in that regard. But of course, usually people apply for projects that are related to their employment because they can demonstrate that they've got the opportunities to implement their findings and do something with it that's really going to have an impact. So have a think about that. But look, there's no limit on the project as long as there's a benefit to Australia in you undertaking that, that travel and learning new things. So the beauty of a Churchill Fellowship is that you design your own project. So we don't tell you, where you need to go, which countries, which people you're going to meet with. You tell us who you want to meet with, why you want to meet with them, why that's important. That's all up to you. So it's a very empowering thing to get a Churchill Fellowship. We really will invest in you and we'll trust you to go ahead and do what you said you wanted to do. We do offer some sponsored Churchill Fellowships where generous individuals or organisations have agreed to fund a fellowship on a particular topic. Now, that doesn't mean that we always award them. Sometimes we can't find projects that line up. So I'd encourage you to have a look on our website and see what sponsored fellowships might be available. In relation to the agriculture and horticulture sector, for example, we've got Saskia Beer, Colin and Maggie Beer. Colin is a Churchill Fellow himself, have established a fellowship in honour of their late daughter Saskia Beer, and what we're looking for there are projects that are to do with innovation in food production or farming, We've got a partnership with Horticulture Innovation, and what we're looking for there are projects that are about new ideas in horticulture. And we have this year on offer a woman named Carolyn Welsh, who is a Churchill Fellow herself. She is generously supporting a Churchill Fellowship to support the agriculture industry's response to climate change. So if that's something that you're working in and interested in, we have a fellowship kind of earmarked for that particular topic. Now you might say, but what if there's several people with that project? That's okay. If several people with projects that fit that are all assessed as suitable, one of them will get the Carolyn Welsh, the others can get a Churchill Fellowship. So it doesn't limit your opportunities, it actually kind of expands in that sense. So you apply online, and applications will close on 1 May. So you won't be able to apply just yet, but all the information you need is on our website. The questions that we ask, that's all there. So you can certainly start preparing now. The application form will be available from 1 March. So you can only use our online application system. If that's a barrier to you, you might tell me, which is not uncommon in anything, my screen reader doesn't work with your website, those sorts of problems, just contact us. We'll work a solution out for you and make it happen. So we don't want people to be turned away because they couldn't fill out an online form. That would be a bit ridiculous. Remember, you're competing against every other applicant. So keep in the back of your mind, how are you going to convince selectors to invest in you and your project or idea? It is a competitive thing. This year, we're introducing something we haven't done previously, which is a 60-minute video pitch, which will form part of your written application. And so there'll be a tool there. All you need is your computer and a microphone and a camera, like I'm sure most people have now, or you can use your phone and record a 60-second video pitch. You'll get to practice it as many times as you want until you're happy, and then you'll get a link which you include in your application. And that's a great opportunity just to get across succinctly, this is me, this is who I am, this is what my project's about, and hopefully convey a compelling message. You will need 2 referees as well. One who can vouch for you as someone who's the kind of person that can do this, and someone that's got some knowledge of your project, your sector, who can say, yep, this is an issue that is really important to Australia. So don't overthink it, but don't leave it to the last minute in doing your application. Take the time to plan it out. If you leave it to the last minute, it won't be your best application. The online form is all automated. You register, you can go in and out of it as many times as you want. Make sure you just save it as you go, and it's there when you come back. So there's no sort of time pressure. We've got till 1 May to get it in. That said, my number 1 tip, and I'll probably sound like a broken record if someone's spoken to me before about this, but think about your referees early. Contact them, make sure they're going to be around during this application window, and do your reference, because you would not believe the number of people that call on 5 p.m. the day the application's closed, telling us, oh, my referee's on holidays. Well, think about that now and get that sorted out. So a little bit about your itinerary. As I said before, that's up to you. We don't decide your itinerary. You should really think carefully about limiting your itinerary just to those places that are most important to you. Don't overcrowd it. Don't come to us with a 4-week proposal where you're going to go to 16 countries, because you'll spend your whole time in a plane. You won't be attending meetings and you'll be exhausted. So plan it out very carefully and really think about those places you need to go that are going to be of the most value. We do like people to have time to rest, time to observe the culture of the country they're in, and time to pick up those meetings they didn't know they were going to get because they met someone and they said, are you here tomorrow? Go and meet this person. And if you have an itinerary that's too busy, you won't be able to take advantage of those opportunities. You do need to be quite specific about who you want to meet, why you want to do it, what you hope to learn, but you don't need to have set up those meetings. So don't think you need to get all the agreement to all those meetings for your application or for your interview. If you get an interview, you don't need to have them locked in, but you do need to have a really good idea of where you're going and why. So that sort of leads us into the selection process. We have panels and committees of fantastic volunteers in each state and territory from a range of fields and sectors. And you'll see from our information sessions and when you apply, we have different categories: agriculture, health and medicine, arts, etc. In a nutshell, there's a shortlisting process, then there's an interview process. In the larger states like New South Wales and Victoria, there's actually 2 rounds of interviews because we get a lot of applications. So the website will include the dates when those are held. So I recommend if you're applying, look ahead to see when those dates for the interviews are set, because they'll be on there. If they're not on there now, they'll be on there soon. And just mark them out in your diary so you don't get caught on the hop and be unable to attend your interview. Quite a lot of people who are interviewed do end up getting a fellowship. So getting to an interview is a significant achievement. And if you're not successful, you are allowed to apply again. Some people ask me that, and it's like, fine, we have people that get their fellowship on the second or maybe the third time they apply, because it is a competitive process. Keep in mind, a new thing we're doing this year, which again, we haven't done before, is we're going to bring all the fellows, this is pretty exciting, all the fellows that we award into Canberra for an onboarding session. That will be in probably early October. We're still getting all the details locked down, but that'll be an opportunity to really meet everyone who's part of your cohort and people that are, in similar fields to you, and we'll, do some training and other things there. So that should be pretty exciting, but keep that in mind as well. We're often asked for tips about the application process, and the best tips I can give you is read the selection criteria and address it. The questions are very straightforward. The hardest thing that people find is we have a limited word count or character count, and just you've got to be succinct, really clear and succinct, and stay away from jargon. If you use jargon, someone like me is going to read it and go, I don't know what they're talking about, and that just makes it a little bit more difficult for you. So, I've got on the slide here, really some of the things we're looking for under the selection criteria. What's compelling about your project? Is there a burning platform? Why is the time right? The benefits, specifically how will this new knowledge or skills benefit you and others? As I said before, really clear itinerary, have a clear focus, be able to answer the question, why? Why are you going to Berlin? Why do you want to meet with that company? Know those answers. Don't just think, oh, that sounds like a great place to visit, because that won't get you over the line. And achievability, this is really important. We need to believe that you're in a position to achieve what you're setting out to do. That's really important. And some of that can come down to your referees, backing you up. And a lot of it's going to come down to you really being across your project and really across what you're planning to do. And the sort of other half of the equation in terms of what we're looking for in the applications is the person, not the project, but the person. Why you? How can you convince us you're the right person to undertake this project? How are you best placed to come back and implement change or influence others? Telling us you're going to get an article in a professional journal isn't going to cut it. I mean, that's great, but that's not enough of an outcome when we're investing, 30 grand, sending around the world. One article in the journal, we're looking for a bit more than that. You'll be expected to create a report on your return. That could be written, it could be a video or podcast, whatever is appropriate to get that message out and really explain where you went, what you did, what you learnt, and how you think that applies in Australia. So, we also offer a lot of post-fellowship opportunities to support you in sharing your findings, including some additional funds you can apply for to help you disseminate your findings, maybe speak at conferences, those sorts of things. We now have impact funding, which is additional funding to help you implement. It might be a project or an idea, whatever it is you're doing. We've got a whole range of things we're doing to help you once you come back. So it's not just a overseas trip, come back and get on with life. This is something we really want to see you make an impact with. So just finally, remember, it is a competitive process. Churchill Fellowships are prestigious, they're well funded, they're hotly contested, but you know what? They're awesome and we want you to apply for them. So don't be shy, put the most effort you can into your application. And, if you're thinking about this and you don't think you're quite ready, but someone who you think is, tell them about it. Like, get people to apply, get onto this as a great opportunity. That's really my main message for you today. And look, if you end up forgetting to ask a question tonight or you sort of feel a bit shy, here's our contact details. Small team here, everyone's very friendly and happy to answer your questions.
Well, thank you for that, Adam. And what a job you've got. I mean, fancy being able to give away 100 of these opportunities to people around Australia on an annual basis. That is just absolutely brilliant. And I can understand why people would be lining up. Now, I've got a lot of questions that I'd like to ask you if I get time towards the end of this, Adam, when we have the panel session. But I'd also like to invite everybody to consider submitting questions through the chat function. If you'd like to do that, just push the chat function on the bottom of the screen and type your question in, and we'll see if we can get to it during the chat session. Now, I'd like to introduce to you our next speaker, Loretta Serafin, who's a Churchill Fellow herself. Loretta is the research agronomist at Summer Grains with New South Wales Department of Primary Industries, based at Tamworth in northern New South Wales. Leading a small team, Loretta conducts experiments on grain sorghum, maize and sunflower crops across northern New South Wales. In this position, she works with farmers and agronomists from the Liverpool Plains to the Queensland border, trialling new practices to improve crop production. She's working on a PhD in sorghum agronomy for low rainfall environments at present. Loretta was awarded a Swire Group-sponsored Churchill Fellowship to study alternative summer oil seeds for profitable, sustainable crop rotations in northeastern Australia. So Loretta, welcome to you. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Leigh. Thanks very much for the introduction. I might just start by sharing my screen, and hopefully that will all work. How's that looking? Okay, so we might just start off, as Leigh has outlined, I received the Swire Group Fellowship. It was actually back in 2006, so quite some time ago. But nonetheless, I think a lot of the things that Adam has covered this evening are still very relevant, and certainly were from when I first started. Now, I'm seeing that there's a problem with screen share, so of course, let's just fix that up for you. Never a dull moment, is there?
I love technology, Loretta. I'm sure you'll get it sorted out pronto.
Oh, what can I say? If you want to hang in there for a second, Leigh, you might tell me if we can now see the slides coming up.
Yeah, I can see things happening, Loretta.
That's the way we want it. Okay. Great. So as I mentioned, my fellowship started in 2006. It was really about trying to investigate factors affecting yield, oil content and quality in a range of alternative oilseed crops, but specifically I looked at sunflowers and sesame. And we were looking for ways to actually improve the economic returns to farmers, and also to look for alternative uses that would enable value adding for those growers. So my two crops of primary choice were sunflowers, which are a pretty small oilseed crop in Australia. And due to the size of the crop, there's always been a need for alternative uses, such as confectionery sunflowers, so that we can try and broaden the base of end users and create more competition on the domestic market. The second crop I was particularly interested in was sesame, which is a very new industry, which really lacked agronomic information to support growers who wanted to actually start growing sesame. And there was very little information about any kind of practices, or indeed some of the best management practices, to overcome some of the basic issues like how can we get the plants best established in a field, what options do we have for weed control, and in particular harvesting, because the term open sesame is not just there for the fun of it. It was actually really talking about the fact that these plants like to open their pods or their capsules when they're ripe and throw their seed. And that obviously makes it very difficult to harvest and get them in the front of a header, like you can see in the photos below. So during my fellowship, I spent 6 weeks overseas, and I decided to focus on 3 countries. So I went to France, Italy, and the United States, and I built an itinerary kind of based on the fact that I wanted to leave a little bit of space for some deviations, but I wanted to have a pretty good idea about where I was going before I left. So specifically, I went to the first International Symposium on Sunflower Industrial Uses in Udine in Italy. And then following that, I went across to France and met with a range of different farmers, plant breeders and researchers, all working on sunflower production. Much like the top photo there, This was a farmer who was just outside of Paris, was growing sunflowers, and talked with them about the way that they grow these crops and their end uses. And then from that, I went on to the United States and spent the largest period of time there visiting North Dakota, Kansas, Missouri, and Texas, and really met with a broad cross-section of people from public and private industry, went through a range of different processing facilities and met with a huge range of different people to discuss what was happening in those industries over there. If someone asked me about things that I would recommend, I would say always leave time for the unexpected. And in some ways, Adam has probably covered off on it. But something I didn't really expect was that people are a lot more helpful and open than you actually anticipate. So I went thinking that people are giving up their time and it's a bit of an inconvenience for them to have to meet with me. But what I actually found was the very opposite, that even in countries like France, and I must be the first to admit that my French is not very good, so even when there was a language barrier, the people had a genuine and keen interest to exchange information with you, and they considered it as a two-way street. So they were keen to talk with you as much as you were keen to talk with them. And from the flip side of that was that opportunities that I'd never imagined or planned appeared. And so it was great that I had a bit of time to go and look at some other crops that I hadn't put as my primary functions, but I went to look at things like amaranth and peanut crops and a range of different alternative oil seeds that they were growing in America. I got asked out of the blue to speak at the Manhattan University, and a gentleman I met from a company over there asked me to review a book chapter while I was there and go to a local school and talk to a school group. So all those things were opportunities to talk more about the Churchill Trust and expand the knowledge and awareness of the program overseas. So things that I'd never had on my itinerary, but which were great experiences all in all. And I think, as Adam said, you'll meet people who will give you these other contacts along the way. You'll say, I'm really interested in sesame and what's happening with breeding in sesame. And then someone will go, oh, well, actually, I know this other plant breeder down the road. You should visit with them while you're here. So I think it's important to make some time and leave some space in your itinerary for those kind of unplanned events. So the big questions, has the Churchill Fellowship had an impact on me? 16 years later, I had to actually look at the numbers. Absolutely it has. So it's definitely, it had provided me with a lot of opportunities to speak with local farmers and community groups upon the return from my Churchill Fellowship. So I did interviews with ABC Radio, lots of local Rotary groups and other community groups, and not just in agriculture, but more broadly opening it up. And I made a lot of networks and indeed some very solid friendships. And in fact, the couple in the photo here from Kansas, we've become lifelong friends with them. In fact, Phil Starman is the gentleman in the photo, was a weeds researcher with Kansas State University, came out to Australia in the following year and completed a sabbatical here, and we worked together for 6 months on a research project. So there's a lot of great outcomes that happen soon after your fellowship and some that will carry on for many years following that. It really is the opportunity, I suppose, to develop the network for ongoing information exchange. And still now, if I come across something I'm not really sure of, for example, a new disease in sunflower, I can contact other pathologists overseas and they'll get back to me and give me their ideas. So it really has been a massive impact on the way that I've operated as previously an extension agronomist and now as a research agronomist in northern New South Wales. And the report that you write, which is very important, as Adam said, with my report and the document that I wrote, I still actually go back to it now and people still contact me and say, we saw you did Churchill Fellowship and it was on this component of sesame or this part of sunflower, can you share it with us? And so it's become a foundation document for many of the practices we've been building here for those industries. What's the best thing about being a Churchill Fellow? Well, it's a long list. I tried to go with a short list here. Of course, the first thing is, receiving your medal and meeting people at the dinner. It's a much younger photo of me with my parents at the dinner and the rest of the recipients from that year in Sydney. So that was all very exciting, but overall it was the bigger aspects. It was the broadening of your horizons and being able to share your area of interest and something you're very passionate about with like-minded people here and overseas. both within your industry and also talking to what I would call an innocent audience. So being asked to speak at events where people had no agricultural background. And so you're trying to impart your knowledge and I suppose make that connection between agriculture and farming and people who are not actually connected with that sector of Australia at all. It was great for improving your confidence. Certainly, the more times you're asked to speak publicly, it's just one of the spin-offs of it, and you become more apt at being able to share your experiences both globally, nationally, and in your own backyard. And the biggest one, I think, and I don't think it's been undersold there, is that it really is an elite group. To be, the recipient of a Churchill Fellowship is something that is quite unique, and there's a very small number of people overall that have been able to receive them. So that's something I'm being very grateful for. A little bit about your application. Somewhat, this really echoes the sentiments of Adam. What I tried to say was pretty much, just articulate what you want to undertake, why you hope to do it, and what are the best places to achieve your goals and how you'll share your knowledge. So try and keep it very concise, and you've got nothing to lose. So you might as well give it a go and just apply. So it's all about everything to gain. You're going to always only get out whatever you put in from being a Churchill Fellow. So remember, it's a great honour and you're representing yourself, the Trust and all other Churchill Fellows from wherever you go further on. Thank you for your time. I'm more than happy to take inquiries from people or other questions afterwards, and I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Leigh.
Thank you, Loretta. Well, great presentation. I've got lots of questions if I get a chance to ask them at the end of this, but I also love the sunflowers behind you. They look absolutely spectacular. Great background. Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to introduce to you Daniel Brown, best known as Dan. Dan's passionate about the Australian dairy industry and enhancing its financial productivity. He has a bachelor's degree in agriculture from the University of Queensland, and from August in 2016, has spent time working his way up from dairy manager to head of dairy with Moxie Farms Proprietary Limited. Dan was awarded a Churchill Fellowship in 2018 to determine effective nutritional management strategies for BCS in intensively housed dairy farms. So to hear a whole lot more, welcome to you, Dan. Good afternoon.
Thanks, Leigh. I'll start out and share my screen here with the presentation you got. Yeah, as Leigh said, I was the 2018 Jack Green Churchill Fellow. I had a fairly strict research project within my dairy background, my dairy business, on nutritional strategies to manage body conditions for an intensively housed dairy cows. The Australian dairy industry, if we start out fairly broadly, is historically quite extensive. There's a lot of cows grazing outside, and there's been a real switch and a movement there in the last several years for operations to intensify and move cows into housing facilities. So without a whole history of experience in the area within Australia, the management of these animals as they move into housing facilities has become quite challenging, and I'm quite focused on working the physical and operational management strategy of these cows to maximise profitability for not only our own business but other dairy farmers in our industry. So this was one topic that I'd been interested in for a very long time, and I was quite lucky to be able to travel and research. I travelled for 8 weeks. I'll get into some of the more intimate details as I scroll through this slide. I spent a lot of my time in the US. I got a great tour in the US. The map shows here all the different states I went to. I got to see a lot of dairy farms, a lot of dairy cows. I met a lot of connections as well. After my time in the US, I also travelled through Europe, through the Netherlands, Belgium and Germany, to see some different aspects of farming and dairy industry in those countries as well. So throughout my trip, I spent 8 weeks. There was 16 flights, were in and out of a lot of airports. I jam-packed as much as I could into that time, while also leaving some slots open, as was discussed earlier, for anything that came across while we were international and any opportunities that popped up, which is quite important. But I managed to jam in there and visit more than 200,000 dairy cows and more than 450,000 dairy heifers in worked through both the strict topic area on the nutritional management, also the broader operational management on these businesses as well. I connected with people at 5 different universities, and I was lucky enough to be involved in one training course and attend 2 conferences for connections while I was there. The goal I set out on this trip was really to balance the viewing these businesses and operations to where I could have these learning experiences, and then networking and interacting with other people at the conferences and the universities to broaden that network and meet as many like-minded people to help collaborate on this research as I could. The highlights for me from the trip, there's 2 real main ones here. I travelled 8 weeks I took my family along with me. I have a wife, and at the time of travel, I had a 2.5, almost 3-year-old daughter, and they came with me, which was really special to be able to share that, but they also helped me out a lot. My wife was amazing to help keep me on track, focused and organised. She directed me right around the US, spent a lot of the time driving while I was taking notes and writing up notes from visits and organising the next contacts and interviews and meetings with people. Without those guys there with me, I would have had more issues in getting across everything we did and staying focused while your family was on the other side of the world. So that was quite important and quite special to me. And then the network and connections and friendships I've made while I was over there, it's still only 4 years since I travelled, but I've got friends that I've spoke to every day since I've been back. We talk religiously, and then I've got professional connections that I discuss and collaborate with on a weekly, monthly basis. We talk all things within our industry and some of these research topics as well. The surprise of the trip for me, I nearly had the blinkers on before I travelled as to how detailed and how focused I was on my one research topic, and how convinced I was of what the main drivers of this managing the body condition score and these intensively housed cows were. And I got a little blindsided when I got over there that there was a lot of stuff that I hadn't considered. It was a lot broader topic than I'd originally thought, and there was a lot of other learnings that were very beneficial to run parallel to this project at the same time. So when I landed over there, I jumped straight into the deep end, and I was in deeper than I thought. So there was a lot of learning to do, and there was a lot of surprises in what I learned there that I didn't initially think that I would have learned. Since I've been back in Australia, there's been quite rapid and further intensification within our dairy industry. There's more and more businesses converting to housing style facilities and looking at ways they can intensify. So I've been quite lucky to be involved with those guys informally and through connections and collaborations, where our business is known to be one of the earlier dairy farms to move into housing facilities, and we've been involved in them for quite some time now. So well known in the industry for that, and a lot of people have reached out, both known what I've researched and what I haven't, but have wanted to discuss from the facility design, if they're to build housing, right through to the operational management and nutritional management of the animals within those facilities. So I've been quite lucky to then be involved with dairy farmers right throughout the eastern seaboard of Australia in their ventures and what they would like to do and build within their business. Had had speaking opportunities both within Australia and internationally. I've been lucky to get quite involved with the Australian Dairy Conference. I've had a few years now on the programming committee where we can help choose the speakers. I've had 2 gigs at keynote speaking there as well, one on a panel and one with a keynote session. And this year, in a fortnight's time, I'm lucky enough to chair the committee and get the conference underway down in Hobart. So I've been quite lucky to network with the people involved in that, have speaking opportunities and broaden the horizons there further. And I've spoken a few of these Zoom style sessions on my research topic and broader dairy management strategies through some Zoom sessions in both the US and the UK. I've learned both through the universities that I engaged with while I was on my travel and Australian universities back home that there's still further opportunities for collaborative research there in our industry, this specific area and there's a few ongoing things there that we are working with some universities currently and looking to do some more in the future. So I think it's the opportunities are endless. Like Loretta said before, what you put into this is what you get out. So I think, yeah, those opportunities are endless. The application process, and my view of the application process was a little daunting at the beginning. It is a very strenuous and strict process. I was initially a little bit taken back by how strict some of the interview processes were, but that has been quite a special experience for me. The application process for me was almost as rewarding on a professional growth level as the fellowship itself. I live in Western New South Wales in a small town. I work on a dairy farm. I spend a lot of time talking to my counterpart dairy farmers and other similar people, but traveling to Sydney and meeting an interview panel on a certain floor of a certain building at a set time and having a layout of how many minutes and seconds to speak about different subjects and answer questions from people, professionals from other industries, was daunting to me at the start, but I really enjoyed the process, and I just have gone through that with anyone I've spoken to since that's looking to apply, and urge them to use that as one of the reasons, even if you're not successful for this. And if I wasn't successful in my Churchill Fellowship goal, I would have taken a lot out of the application process too. So I just urge everyone to jump into that and make the most of it. Like Adam had said, the best advice there is to read the application material. They do outline what to talk about, what they would like to know about you, and how long to speak for. Like, there's a reason they've listed it down. I do think it's important to follow that closely. And the other part that was quite awakening there for me was I thought I was going to get bombarded with a lot of interview questions on my specific research topic, but it was important for me to understand the broader industry as well, because there was a lot of questions that weren't specifically related to my topic, or even there was a lot how I was going to disseminate when I came home, but there was a lot about the broader interaction of the industry that I was involved in as well. So make sure when you're looking to apply that you don't put the blinkers on a little bit too hard like I could have, and make sure you know the broader parts of the industry you're working in as well. I think that wraps up my presentation there. I'll stop sharing my screen now and might pass it back over to Leigh.
Good on you, Dan. Thank you. It was a really interesting presentation as well. Really appreciated the things that you had to say. So we've gone about the best part of 25 minutes or so before the end of this session. Please, if you'd like to ask questions, do use the function on the bottom of the page to do so. I note that a lot of people already have asked questions, and that through the presentations that we've been listening to and watching this afternoon, a fair number of those questions have actually been answered. But if there are questions that come to mind now, or as we progress through the discussion phase now, please don't hesitate to get onto the Q&A function and send us some more questions. I'd certainly appreciate that. So Dan and Loretta, if I can ask you to both turn your cameras back on so that we can now get into a bit of a panel discussion about these things. I'd like to start with you, Adam. I said after you finished, I mean, what a job. Fancy being able to give away these opportunities to so many lucky Australians every year. Is it a truly transformative experience for people who are lucky enough to get one of these fellowships? Do they really change through this process in your experience?
Look, 100%. Life-changing experiences just thrown around by so many Churchill Fellows. It's not funny. We did a massive research project last year to explore impact from Churchill Fellowships and how do we support that, make it happen. And what it found was that absolutely there's an individual transformation, and the expertise and new knowledge kind of requires that transformation for the person to come back and just step into this world where they've got a global network, they've got more kudos, they've got recognition, they've got knowledge, and it just sort of happens from there.
Loretta, how do you think it changed your experience overseas?
I think, Leigh, that I was probably in the category where I applied not thinking I would ever get a fellowship. I probably was a little bit hesitant, but just thought I'd give it a go. And so when I went overseas, I think really that it just built those networks, and it was the fact that so many people, as I said, were so willing to give their time so generously to me, and then wanted to maintain that contact. I didn't really expect that, and I was a bit overwhelmed with how much people were willing to invest in me, someone that they didn't even know from the other side of the world, and the fact that they were genuinely interested, and that really did make a big impact on my life. And much like Daniel, my husband actually travelled with me, and he became pretty much my official event photographer. And he's not much good at taking notes, I'm sorry to say, but I'd like to say that part of that experience is something where you can share the experience with your partners or husbands or wives, but also share the experience with the people that you're meeting overseas. And I think just looking at the bigger community aspect, you get that involvement when you visit another country.
Loretta, you were almost, I got the impression you didn't expect to get the fellowship. How did you feel when they told you got it?
I was very disbelieving. Like Dan, I travelled to Sydney for the interview, and to be honest, I remember going to that interview, and it was like a car crash getting there. It was just a series of bad events. And I remember turning up to the interview and we were late, like the trains had been delayed, the taxi we got into broke down. It was one of those sagas, and you get there and I just thought, what am I turning up to here? And so when I got the information saying that I'd received one, I was just very overwhelmed that someone like myself, who I consider to just be, I say it all the time, I'm just an agronomist, and but that I would be considered for a fellowship, and that someone would want to invest that amount of money in helping me with my interest area was very overwhelming.
And Dan, I think you said it in your presentation, and Loretta has just said it a couple of moments ago, but were people really genuinely generous to you while you were away, and willing to help with anything that you were wanting to know about?
Absolutely, yeah. The networks and the connections we made and the generosity of people blew me away. We had people take us in, and we stayed with their family, and we spent Thanksgiving with people's extended family that we'd met while we were over there, and we toured all around their operations and their private lives as well. And I've got friends that as I said, I speak to every day since, and it gives a really good basis of meeting these connections when you have this fellowship as the reason you're traveling, that people know that you're serious, you're there to learn, that you're a professional, and that's really what set up a lot of these connections the right way, I think.
I'm really interested to hear that it's ongoing now, that those friendships have been formed and that you are staying in touch. How is that working? Is it both at the professional level and the personal level, or one or the other, both? What is it?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few close contacts that I speak to very regularly on both professional and a personal level. So I'm quite lucky to have that they're both professional networks and collaborators for me, and people to brainstorm, throw ideas around with. But we share photos of our families and adventures we go on, and different things we're thinking about in our personal lives too. So really grateful for that.
And Loretta, is it similar for you? Are you having the same sort of post-fellowship experience with these ongoing relationships?
Absolutely, Leigh. And I shared that photo of Phil and Linda, and they would be, the perfect example for me, that even though there's a significant age gap, that really that age difference didn't matter, and we became great friends with these people, both on a personal and a professional basis, and that has really developed. And I mean, some people obviously you meet and the connection will always be just professional, but there are always going to be people that you meet as part of your fellowship who really invest from the word go in you personally as well. And so it's a great opportunity to build those networks, and I think you just can't undersell the value of that. Even now, as I said, 16 years later, it's a significant period of time, and we're still in close contact.
That's great. Now I've got stacks of questions that I'd like to ask, but others are getting on to the Q&A now and asking questions and wanting answers. So I'll go to some of them now. Karen has asked asked Dan about the application process. Now, Dan, you said it was strenuous, and the written application asks for 350 characters, about 4 lines of text per criteria, Karen says, which is short and challenging to provide enough information to address the questions. So has she got the right sense of it there? Is she on the right track? She's been drafting her application before before the online forum actually opened. So any tips for Karen?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. And like Adam said at the start, with the limited wording on that written document, is to make it quite succinct, try and get all the points across without taking up too many characters, and try and make a little point. So to me, the more strenuous part and the bit where I tried to cram the most in was once I progressed through and I knew I was progressing through to the interview level. So I'd had my 350 words or whatever the written application was at the time, and then trying to prepare myself for every different sort of question I think I could get asked at the interview, and making sure I've got that knowledge on call ready to go. So it for me where I was like, right at the start, I've got to make this quick and succinct and get a point across, and then I just tried to completely cram everything I could.
Now, Adam, this might be a practical question that you can answer. Helen's asking, can you go to a conference as part of your trip?
Look, you can, if you can make the case for it. Usually, we can cover the fee for a conference, but I do be careful with this one. It's not a conference junket. So don't go, oh, beauty, I've been wanting to go to this conference for a long time. That's not a Churchill Fellowship, right? But if you go, oh, it just happened to be like there is something that's going to be in that country about the time I'm planning to be there, and it's really relevant, that's cool.
Now, Lloyd's also asking about some examples of how in applications applicants have suggested how they're going to communicate their learnings post-trip to do what you were suggesting at the beginning, Adam, that this is about benefiting Australians more broadly, bringing something back to the community. So what can you say to Lloyd about that?
Yeah, look, there's so many ways, and it really depends on your topic and the community you're talking about. But everything from, presenting at conferences, to holding workshops, to putting on, demonstrations, to meeting with industry groups, to setting up a website, to doing podcasts, to doing media engagement and outreach, to, meeting with ministers. All that, it just depends on what you're trying to achieve. There's so many ways you can do it, and we will provide guidance and support all the way along. Rachel, who was behind the scenes here tonight, is a bit of a whiz at getting media coverage for our fellows before they go, when they come back. This is really important, so have a think about all those sorts of things.
Now, we're getting lots of positive comments about the presentations, guys. People clearly appreciating them and finding this a very informative session, which is exactly what we're intending here tonight. So that's terrific. Now, Caroline says, both of your projects, Loretta and Daniel, were quite technical. And she's asking about any observations you might make about undertaking a Churchill Fellowship as opposed to obtaining something like a Nuffield Scholarship, which is also a wonderful thing that's available in Australia on an annual basis as well. Any thoughts or comments about that? I might start with you, Loretta.
Good question. I haven't personally done a Nuffield. I was actually on GRDC Northern Panel as one of their board members, and so there was some involvement from a distance with Nuffield scholars. I think it's also a very worthwhile option, but the way that the Nuffield has been set up is quite different to a Churchill Fellowship. In my experience, the Churchill is a very individual experience, whereas with the Nuffield, there's a lot more, I suppose, kind of group or team emphasis. So I think for me, I obviously went through a Churchill Fellowship and I found that a very rewarding experience, but it really depends on your area and how you prefer to operate. So, but a lot of, in terms of networks and contacts, I think there's a lot of options out there. Like, there's a lot more options now than there was 16 years ago. I remember researching people on the internet, and now you'd probably be on Twitter and every other social media platform looking at who's working in that space. But yeah, I think it's really just about reaching out to people that you think could be working or involved in the area you're interested in, asking a few questions.
Now, Adam, this one might be for you as well, actually. One of our questions here is, can you include overseas short courses which might be relevant to your topic in the fellowship expenses?
Yeah, like 100%. Some people have done fellowships which are entirely a course, and it's very specific. I'm going over to, Italy to learn about Italian, stone letter carving, and it's a, 4-week course, and you can't do it anywhere else in the world. That's fine. That's a Churchill Fellowship. So it doesn't have to be, like I said at the start, sort of a formal research thing. You can certainly learn new skills.
Adam, I'm interested to get a bit more insight into what the Trust's expectations are of people when they return from this. What do you expect people do once they've had the experience, gain that knowledge, form those networks, and bring all that information home?
So, look, I think part of that comes down to the guidance we give in terms of a report. So there's an expectation, and it's not an obligation that I want people to focus on, to come back and write a report or create some kind of, account of your Churchill Fellowship and what you learned in the experience. We want people to have thought about everything they've learned and how can I apply this in the Australian context, and to have a clear plan of how they're going to engage with the people who might be able to do something with that. Now, so in some cases, it might be, it's me. I'm going to come back now and I'm going to do this thing differently, and I'm going to then share that with, other people in my industry or my sector, and I'll apply this new knowledge. Or it might be, look, I can see here that there's a need to influence policy or legislation. So what I will do is I'm going to start talking to, my local representatives or my industry body. I'm going to lobby them on this. I'm going to share this knowledge. I'm going to try and convince people that they should be changing. And I think, a really strong applicant is going to come to us already saying this, I've already had a chat to my local councillor and they know this is an issue, and they said, come back and see me when you've done this, if you get one, and that's what I'm going to do. And, you sort of have this plan. I know what I'm doing, not just, I don't know, I'll see what happens when I come back. Because, of course, what happens is you come back and people are like, things are waiting for you. You've been away and you've got to get busy catching up on a few things, and people can get a little bit overwhelmed and lost. That's where, we obviously want to provide some additional support for people to help them along. But we expect that people are going to come back with a bit between their teeth to try and do something with what they've learned.
Now, when you say, Adam, that you may give additional support, what do you mean by that? Extra money for people to travel to different parts of Australia to tell their story?
100%. Yeah, look, so sometimes people say, it's amazing. They'll say, oh, God, I got invited to present at this conference and it's up on, in Cairns. Can you give me any assistance to help me get up there? And so we quite often will say, yeah, look, we can maybe cover your airfare or your accommodation or something like that. We'll give some assistance to get people up to share that knowledge. That could be other things as well. Sometimes people, it's funny because everything's online, but sometimes a printed document, a really nice report, you get something you want to give someone still, and it can make a difference. And so we've given some financial assistance to get a graphic designer to make their report look, the business, because that's not necessarily everyone's skill, right? You've got some people aren't very good at writing, and that's okay. And we can also look at, can we give you some assistance in getting someone to maybe, edit your content into something that's a bit more punchy and digestible. So those are sorts of things that we can offer support here. And as I said, there's in-kind support here through us looking at ways that we can, help get media coverage, use our social media networks. We do have some other leadership kind of courses that we offer fellows as well once they've done their fellowship. There is actually another overseas, a global leadership practices program, where you sort of go with a cohort of senior, public servants and private sector people, not-for-profit people, and go and learn about, it's in Japan actually later this year, learn about those cultures and colonies. That's more about growing further as a leader and getting confident to continue to make change. And I think just going back to that question about the Nuffield, I mean, Nuffield's great, and it's I think it complements the Churchill Fellowship quite nicely, and I'm sure there's people that have done both, and good luck to them. But I think for us, it's probably our weak spot in terms of the ag sector. Is everyone's heard of a Nuffield in the ag sector, not many people heard of the Churchill. So I think please, spread the word if you're in that sector, because I think it's a lot in terms of networking that you can gain out of a Churchill Fellowship. And there are a lot of Churchill Fellows you should be able to network with now already.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Adam, and thank you for making it. I've really been interested to hear about your experiences tonight, Loretta and Dan. I'd like to ask each of you, how has it changed you, and how has it changed what you're actually doing now that you're back in Australia? Maybe, Loretta, you first.
That's a really good question. I think a lot of the changes have been very subtle, and that you probably come back with a slightly different mindset, and just the fact that you have so many other networks and opportunities. It certainly gave me a little bit more confidence to try other things and apply for other opportunities. And I've been overseas to several other international conferences then, and so I suppose really I would say it came down to confidence that what I wanted to talk about and the area I'm interested in would be of interest to other people. So it's probably made a lot of differences personally to the way that I operate. And I'm still working for the same organisation that I was when I did the Churchill Fellowship, which is pretty unusual these days. But I've changed roles within that company several times, and I think part of that is as a result of the Churchill experience and the confidence given me.
And what about you, Dan?
It's funny, the first word that come to mind for me was confident also. It's given me more confidence that I have the experience in what I do in my field and what I'm talking about, but it's given me more confidence and changed the way I interact with other people and engage with people as well. It's just from being thrown in the deep end on the other side of the world, countries that speak different languages, people with different experiences in it.
Oh, we've lost your audio. Oh, you're back. Right. Yeah, just a momentary drop out there, Dan. So maybe if you can remember what the last sentence you were saying was.
Yeah, just from the experiences over there has changed the way I engage and interact with people, both personally and professionally, since I've been home as well.
Yeah. Now, they say that travel broadens the horizons. That's the old saying. And of course, that's exactly what Churchill Fellowships are about. It's about traveling. It's about going to different places, meeting new people, learning about new things. One of the things that I've found over the years with my adventures with ABC Rural and going to different parts of the world is it's fascinating to see how differently people can think about exactly the same thing. Now, was that your experience, Loretta?
Absolutely. I would actually say sometimes it's quite surprising. I remember being in areas of North Dakota and thinking I could be in a paddock at Moree. Like the environment looks so similar and the background looks so similar. But yet when I was talking to the farmers there, some of their thoughts were very on par with Australian growers that I work with, and others were just streets apart. It was like I was on another planet, not just in another country. So, there's always many similarities and there's also many differences. And I think part of the experience is listening to those people and bringing back what would be adaptable or adoptable to growers here, and things that you could suggest as other ideas to people that maybe they hadn't considered. So it's always a little bit about thinking outside the square.
And Dan, what about you? Was that your experience too? Did you find it fascinating that people can think so differently about exactly the same thing in a different part of the world?
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly what I witnessed as well. I think that helped me with my problem-solving skills then. If I'm faced with a complex problem, it's given me a more considered approach to it, and you start to think, what would different people be thinking, or what would different people do? And I've taken part of that on board.
Now, I've had a number of comments tonight from people saying, look, thank you so much. It's been really informative, and this has helped me think about how I'm going to frame my application now, and it has given me some more confidence to do that. And that's exactly what we want out of a session like this tonight. We're getting pretty close to the end of it now. We've only got a few minutes left, but Loretta and Dan, you've both given quite a few tips about how people can best go about making their applications. Are there any particular points that you'd really like to pass on that you think would make a difference for people who are thinking about putting in an application? So maybe Dan, start with you. Have we got you, Dan?
Have you got me?
Yep.
Yeah. My biggest tip would be to keep the written application short and succinct and not waffle in there, and then commit a lot of stuff to memory bank for the in-person verbal discussion and interview would be my biggest tip.
And Loretta?
Looking back, I would probably suggest that they speak to someone else who's been on a Churchill Fellowship, and these information sessions are a great way to obviously hear what other people have done. But yeah, that was something I didn't do beforehand, and I think now, like Adam's saying, there's quite a few people in agriculture, if that's your chosen field, who have travelled and undertaken Churchill Fellowships. So yeah, it's, you know, easy to reach out and contact someone. And, you know, I'd never met Dan. I heard about his fellowship before today, and even though it's not in cropping, obviously, as I'm, you know, surrounded by kind of Day of the Triffids here, it's still really interesting to see what is happening and what other people have been doing, and how you might think about your own work differently from that.
And Adam, you're the big banana, so to speak. You're the guy that people really need to impress. What sort of grabs your attention when you see these applications? Because you would see a lot.
Look, I've seen a lot. I've been to countless interviews. It's going to sound a little bit, I don't know, cheesy, but honestly, passion. If someone's passionate about what they're doing, you can tell straight away. You can tell when you read the application, when you meet them, you can tell straight away they really, really are honestly passionate about what they're doing. They're going to do something amazing with it. If someone's just applying because it's like, I just need funding for some other thing, I've got, you know, it's just like an admin process, so they've got 28 application ins for all sorts of funding grants and things, you can tell that straight away too. And that doesn't really tick the boxes for a Churchill Fellowship. So, you know, apply for something that you're really, really interested in, because you'll do well. And you know, I read something today that said, you've got to be in it to win it. You've also got to be in it to lose it. Well, don't be afraid of losing it. Like, just have a go. Don't sit back. You won't get one if you don't apply.
Yes, and you did say it's a very competitive process. You get lots of applications, but that wouldn't be a reason not to put in one, would it? Just because there are lots of others on the same mission.
Absolutely not. And look, you know, some people say, oh, there'll be other people applying this topic. That doesn't mean, you know, we won't award more than one person on a similar topic. I mean, that happens all the time. So yeah, I think, you know, you've got to back yourself. No one else is going to put the application in for you. And honestly, you know, we don't have a preconceived idea about the type of person, the background they come from, the industry they're in. You know, we really want to see people from all walks of life across Australia. So the more people we can get from ag sector, horticulture, rural Australia, you know, bring it on. We want it. We don't want to see all the same people applying and getting them each year.
And just finally and quickly from the three of you in turn, perhaps I'll start with you in a moment, Dan, but your final words of encouragement for people to consider putting pen to paper or getting on the computer and doing the online application. What words of encouragement would you offer, Dan?
I would say back yourself, regardless of whether you make it through the whole process or not. I think it's going to be worthwhile for you, no matter how far you get through. Go for it. Have confidence in yourself.
And Loretta?
I think I'd support Dan's, you know, outputs there, and just say that, you know, as I said, I didn't think that I was someone who would ever be worthy of receiving that, and, you know, I gave it a go. And I think one thing that Adam said to me that really resonates with me is that I've always kind of operated with the thought that I wouldn't go for something if I didn't truly want it. Then I kind of feel like I shouldn't be applying for it anyway. So if you truly want to undertake something bad enough, and then I think, you know, that's a good reason to apply. That's the best reason.
Now, we are pretty much out of time now. It's been a terrific session. It's been really informative. I've enjoyed it immensely. In fact, I want to sign up myself now and put in an application. So look out, Adam Davey. There could be something coming from Crafers in South Australia for you. These are wonderful opportunities. And if the interest in this session is anything to gain tonight, I think it's clear that some 200 registrations to hear more about the Churchill Trust tonight says it all. Thank you to Adam Davey, to Loretta Serafin, Dan Brown, and also to the Winston Churchill Trust, of course. You can also attend any of the other information sessions that are being held throughout February. Visit the Churchill Trust website for more dates and details. This and other information sessions will be made available online later on. So from my own perspective, can I heartily encourage you to apply for a Churchill Fellowship. Applications do open on the 1st of March. They go through until the 1st of May. All the very best with it, and I hope you have a wonderful time if you get one. Thanks so much for your time tonight. Good night, everyone.